Hello and welcome to Expectations and Having Conversations that Encourage, Inform, and Shape Employment Planning. My name is Jessica Craho, and I'm with the Iowa Coalition for Integration and Employment, and I'll be your presenter for today. This training was developed to support community-based case managers, care managers, service coordinators, and integrated health home coordinators to have the tools and skills you need to implement employment first and to provide direction to your role and responsibilities in bringing employment first to life for all Iowans with disabilities in their communities. As frontline staff in the planning, authorization, coordination, and monitoring of employment services for Iowans utilizing LTSS, your role is so integral to the success of Employment First. You set and help maintain high expectations for full integration and partner with individuals and their families and guardians to offer supported decision-making around integrated competitive employment. If it's okay with you, from here forward, I'm going to use the term case manager to represent everybody coordinating and authorizing and monitoring services. So this might be through a managed care organization, provider agency, DHS targeted case management, regional case management or care coordination entity, or integrated health home coordination. In this webinar, we're going to be focusing again on case manager expectations and having conversations that encourage, inform, and shape planning for integrated employment. And we'll cover what Employment First is, and we'll talk a little bit about the national movement towards Employment First and Iowa's efforts and commitment to Employment First as well. We'll talk about case manager expectations and the role they play in helping people pursue integrated employment. I'll give you some strategies and tips on encouraging individuals and families to pursue integrated employment. We'll use some employment guides to planning to help shape and give structure to that. And I'll also give you some strategies and tips when addressing concerns and handling objections and to ensure that you're providing informed choice to individuals around employment. And last but not least, we'll talk about those referral and funding sources that help support integrated competitive employment. So let's start with some basics, and by defining some of the terms I've already thrown out at you, like Employment First and integrated competitive employment, and how these have been shaped in Iowa Medicaid Enterprise's vision for employment. And then we'll talk a little bit more about why this is so important, why we're talking about so much of this, and how it applies to your work. So what is Employment First? Well, the U.S. Department of Labor Disability Employment Policy, or ODEP, says it's both a philosophy and a policy that says employment is the first priority and preferred outcome of publicly funded services for people with disabilities. It is also a framework for systems change that is centered on the premise that all citizens, including those with significant disabilities, are capable of full participation in integrated employment and community life. So how is competitive integrated employment defined? Well, it's work, including self-employment, for which the individual is paid at or above minimum wage and not less than the customary wage and level of benefits paid by the employer for the same or similar work performed by employees who are not disabled, where the employee interacts with other persons who are not disabled to the same extent as others who are in comparable positions, and that represents opportunities for advancement that are similar for those who are not disabled. In the case of an individual who is self-employed, the business results in an income that is comparable to the income received by others who are not disabled and are self-employed in similar occupations. In competitive integrated employment, the wage is always paid by the employer. So how have these been shaped? The DHS employment vision? Well, as you can see here, it's very similar and mirrors those almost exactly. This vision says employment in the general workforce is the first priority and expected and preferred outcome in the provision of publicly funded services for all working age Iowans with disabilities. So why are we talking about this? Why is there so much conversation about employment and expectations for integrated competitive employment nationally, statewide, and locally? Well, I want to give you a little bit of background on some of the trends in federal legislation, federal policy guidance, regulatory changes, and legal interpretations of states' obligations under the Americans with Disabilities Act, or the ADA, enacted in 1990, along with state policymaking that have created a new environment with different expectations and rules for the provision of employment and day services for people with disabilities. It's important for you to know the background or a bit of the historical context and legislative happenings around an issue like employment for people with disabilities so that you can effectively and positively convey information to individuals and their families about those legislative happenings and changes and how it will impact them, especially during times of change. So the ADA, again passed in 1990, is to assure equality of opportunity, full participation, independent living, and economic self-sufficiency for individuals with disabilities. And Title II of the ADA prohibits discrimination on the basis of disability in all services, programs, and activities provided to the public. In 1999, the Supreme Court in the Olmstead v. LC decision affirmed Title II of the ADA, again, which prohibits unnecessary segregation of people with disabilities. Olmstead requires that people with disabilities receive services in the most integrated setting appropriate to their needs, and this applies to where individuals live, work, and play. Oh, there's Olmstead. So the U.S. Department of Justice, or the DOJ, is who monitors and enforces the ADA's Title II, and recent Olmstead enforcement actions by the U.S. DOJ include 2012, 2014, and 2015 settlement agreements in Virginia, Rhode Island, and Oregon, respectively. And I share these with you to tell you that there are precedents for how states are to provide and implement integrated work options, and that all partners have been held equally responsible. Another major force shaping employment expectations and services is the Center for Medicare and Medicaid Services, or CMS, which administers Medicaid, including home and community-based services, or HCBS, through waivers or state plan services. CMS has been very clear about their position on employment first in both the September 2011 guidance on employment for individuals in Medicaid home and community-based waiver programs and the January 2014 final settings rule on home and community-based services. Both of these are intended to ensure that individuals receiving HCBS have full access to the benefits of community living and the opportunity to receive services in the most integrated setting appropriate to their needs. CMS says, and I quote, "Work is fundamental in life activity for adults. It provides a sense of purpose, shaping who we are and how we fit into our community. All individuals, regardless of disability and age, can work and work optimally with opportunity, training, and support that builds on each person's strengths and interests." And that comes from the CMS Informational Bulletin released September 16, 2011. I want to reiterate again CMS's strong endorsement of employment first within the setting rules, expecting that all community-based work happen in settings that are competitive and integrated. I also want to stress to you that health plans across the country and the states that they are in, according to subject matter expert Dr. Lisa Mills, they're being asked to help ensure compliance with the rules. Not just initial compliance, but also they're being charged with ensuring long-term compliance. And MCOs take compliance very seriously. So why would a managed care organization, national healthcare plan, or any other LTSS, HCBS service or funding entity support or care about integrated employment? Well, what employment service, from the perspective of CMS, best meets the setting standards? Well, without a question, individual, integrated, competitive employment is fully compliant. She says anything else may be put under scrutiny. There's other legislation in support of integration and high expectations, and this includes the U.S. Department of Education's Individuals with Disabilities Act, which helps guarantee that all children with disabilities have free public education available to them. It emphasizes special education and related services designed to meet their unique needs and prepare them for education. I want to emphasize employment and independent living. The Rehabilitation Act, which is the federal law governing the provision of vocational rehabilitation services, also includes the presumption of employability. And the Rehabilitation Act was reauthorized with the Workforce Innovation and Opportunity Act in July of 2014, which requires state agencies to work together to improve community-integrated competitive employment opportunities for youth and adults with disabilities, expanding the role of both VR and workforce in supporting youth and individuals with disabilities. And it also limits the number of transition-age youth entering into sheltered work and earning a sub-minimum wage. Iowa has long been committed to employment first for persons with disabilities, including those with the most significant disabilities, since before 2009. Diverse stakeholders from all across the state have been coming together to participate in federal, state, and community change and systems change efforts. There's been an increased demand for integrated community-based and inclusive services, particularly from younger service recipients and their families. In the fall of 2009, Iowa AFSCME held a summit and released a white paper entitled Iowa's Employment First Initiative, a call for change of historical proportion. And this work represented some of the earliest employment first activities in our state. In 2010 and 2011, state partners and diverse stakeholders worked with the State Employment Leadership Network and a number of activities to support employment first in the state. And also conducted was an MEPD claim study that I'll tell you more about here in a little bit. One of the key highlights described by Employment First involves a positive view of everyone's employment potential. Iowa systems no longer ask whether a person can work, but instead ask what employment best matches the person's strengths, skills, and interests, and conditions for success. The cornerstone of Employment First in Iowa has been to change our expectations, believing that everyone can work with the right match and the right supports. Since 2012, collaborative projects, including the Iowa Employment First Project, the Iowa Coalition for Integration and Employment, and the Disability and Employment Initiative, have all shown through their projects that persons with disabilities can work in community integrated employment at competitive wages. And when our systems and service providers come together collaboratively to leverage our resources and networks and individualized supports provided to the person. So for example, here's some of the outcomes of those Employment First and IC pilot projects and DEI pilot projects, where we were able to demonstrate by utilizing strategies like customized employment that persons with the most significant disabilities could work. This work also included rebalancing efforts in Medicaid employment services that went into effect back in May of 2016, in which service definitions were revised to match the September 2011 CMS bulletin. It's changed reimbursement to a fee schedule and redistributed Medicaid resources from facility-based to community-based services. The rules also included pre-vocational services as a wraparound to other services to keep the person whole. It aligned policy and funding protocols between DHS and IVRS and allowed for employment services to happen concurrently, for all services to lead to long-term job coaching, and tiers designed to meet individual needs while encouraging fading of professional support over time. So I mentioned earlier, before sharing some of that historical context or legislative happenings, how knowing a little bit about what's happening and the intention can help you frame or convey the legislative or policy changes in a positive way to others, including individuals and families. So I want to give you an example of how you might frame or talk about WIOA. So let's say you're talking with an individual and their family who is currently working in a sheltered workshop and earning a sub-minimum wage. You could say, right now you have a job and that job is giving you good work experience. Depending on your job, you can make different wages. In Iowa, the minimum wage for work is $7.25 an hour. Some people work in jobs that pay less than minimum wage. There's a new law that requires that anyone who makes less than minimum wage have the opportunity to get information and resources that provide them with different work options, including jobs in the community that pay at least minimum wage. So when the intent of the legislation and its mandates are framed or expressed in a way that really just says that it allows for some exploration and experience and choices, it doesn't seem so scary. And you're going to hear these three words again in the presentation. I want you to write them down so that you can remember them. Again, they're exploration, experience, and choices. Again, when things are framed in this way, changes or mandates or policies changes don't seem so scary. Exploration, experience, and choice are often things that folks can get behind. So again, let's revisit Iowa's vision for employment. Employment in the general workforce is the first priority and expected and preferred outcome in the provision of publicly funded services for all working-age Iowans with disabilities. So why is this Iowa's employment vision? Why do we value competitive integrated employment and believe that everyone can work? Well, the slide I'm showing you here, this comes from Dr. Lisa Mills, and she shared this with us when she connected with us back in May of 2016, and really guided us and taught us a lot about maximizing our partnerships with NCOs to advance employment first. And she says that this slide and this graph really summarizes the commentary that's going on between health plans and state Medicaid agencies right now. She says there's recognition that health is driven a lot by our social and economic circumstances, not so much about clinical care, which you see there is about 10%. The actual things like buying health care isn't what indicates what people's health is. The biggest factors are, do I have a job? Do I have income? Do I have a decent place to live? Am I socially connected or socially isolated? Managed care organizations recognize that all of these things are what drives people's health, and that these are the kind of things that LTSS can influence and manage. There is a strong case for integrated competitive employment and the benefit it would have for a managed care organization or any other entity providing HCBS or LTSS services. The first thing is the health outcome. There's clear evidence in the research that employment contributes to better health, and better health contributes to better employment. It's what researchers call bidirectional. So for a managed care organization or national health plan whose primary focus has always been health outcomes, employment is really a key tool. LTSS employment services is a way for national health plans to provide both acute and primary care, and LTSS to influence health outcomes. When a member accesses LTSS employment services and goes to work, there is a significant positive impact to their overall health status, therefore reducing the healthcare needs and costs of that member. Those who are employed and effectively utilizing all of their LTSS yield a great savings on the acute or primary care side or the health side. Dr. Mills also tells us that there is evidence in the medical health field that employment is a way or a tool to prevent mental illness, as well as a tool to recovery. It's seen as a form of treatment that the field is embracing. There may be a lot of folks that don't have mental health as their primary diagnosis, but who may have it as a co-occurring condition. And she says we're seeing this a lot more in LTSS care populations. So we're seeing folks that have mental health diagnosis as their secondary or tertiary diagnosis. So it becomes important across the board. As we know, employment enhances income to contribute to support and support needs and provides access to employer-supported health care. And the last finding from the literature is that when people are employed, they have greater skills and activities of daily living, which often translates into needing less support at home and in the community on an ongoing basis. Research also shows that persons with disabilities who have high self-determination or really opportunities to maximize their decision-making abilities and exert control over their life are often healthier, more independent, able to adjust to changing needs, and always safer. And as we all know, employment creates opportunities to build and use natural supports and develop meaningful relationships and valued roles, which are always invaluable to our health. So let's talk a little bit real quick about how integrated employment translates still into cost savings dollar-wise. So Dr. Rob Samara, who's done a ton of research and work in the collection and analysis of supported employment versus facility-based employment services and the cost, In his 2007 research, he found that the U.S. average monthly net benefit to taxpayers per supported employment employee was $251.34 a month. He also found that the supported employment employee, the cost is often around $6,000 or $6,600 versus a sheltered workshop employee who totals out around $19 to $20. In his work that he did in Iowa back in 2012, Dr. Rob Samara found that for every $1 invested in Iowans in supported employment, $1.62 was returned to Iowa's economy, and that was compared to a national return of $1.47. And in a study conducted by the University of Iowa and Public Policy Center that I mentioned earlier, that was designed to determine if participation in Medicaid for employed people with disabilities, or MEPD, or Iowa's Medicaid buy-in impacts healthcare costs or the effects of employment on healthcare costs. So when they looked at the claims data from 2000 to 2011, they found that MEPD members' claims expenses were 21% less than expected. And just a quick reminder that MEPD is the Medicaid buy-in program in which you can remain eligible and access Medicaid on a sliding scale fee. Oh, so we need you, right? You are so important to this. And as I can't say and stress enough, you have a valued role, an integral role, along with your expertise in the provision of quality and timely service planning and authorization of employment services and supports, facilitating and supporting person-centered service delivery, and monitoring and following along to ensure successful outcomes. But first and foremost, you set the expectation. None of this works if you don't believe everyone can work with the right supports. No one goes to work unless somebody believes they will. If you don't believe it, then it won't happen. If you don't know how strategies in supported employment and customized employment are matching individuals and skills, even with the most significant disabilities, to employers with unmet needs, then you won't be able to help an individual and their family in supported decision-making around employment and helping them to create a vision. And they so need that vision, because without a vision, employment or employment in the community is a risk versus an uncertainty. If we don't have a vision, it's way riskier and we often freeze. With a picture, it's a lot easier to move forward. And we'll talk more here in a little bit about how you might be able to help create that picture or that vision and who can help you do that. But we need to help create a picture for the person about working. What are they doing? What does the business look like? Who are they working with? What time of day is it? These are the things that discovery and other strategies can help create a vision, and that providers can help partner in as well. Too often individuals and families are not connected with ordinary examples of what is possible. They have seen few examples of young people or adults with significant disabilities working, going to college, or contributing in other ways. So it will be important to maintain high expectations and to have knowledge about approaches in employment. That way you'll be able to you'll be able to convey information in a positive way, even when you're met with challenges and resistance, so that you can facilitate service planning and authorization for integrated competitive employment that's both person-centered and responsive. If you don't expect it or believe it, you won't talk about it, plan for it, or authorize it. So as we go down this path together and think about and talk about persons with the most significant disabilities getting to work, we do have to recognize that it's very complex and it can be very tricky. As a field or as a system, we're structured for placing individuals with mild or moderate disabilities, but we haven't necessarily been expected, nor do we know how to place individuals with limited physical and cognitive abilities or severe behavioral problems. This is a new arena for many of us, if not all of us, and it may seem impossible when at first you might only see the disability. So then it can be a challenge for all of us to let go of previously held assumptions and history, to look at information in a new way and collect it without judgment, and to focus on what the person knows how to do and how they do it. But in order to achieve our goal, it's critical that we provide the accurate amount of support to individuals. Believing really is seeing. Now I want to share with you something subject matter expert Abby Cooper shared with Iowa when she was talking about this very thing. And she told us that Einstein said this about his theory of relativity, saying that if he didn't believe it, that it was possible and that he was open to it, open to seeing it, he would have never have made his discovery. And she says the same is true if we don't believe people with the most significant disabilities can work. And it's not going to happen because we won't see it. Nobody goes to work, not one person listening, unless they have someone who believes in them and helps them figure it out. So let's think about that for a minute. Everyone goes to work because someone believed they could and that they would. It was the expectation. Let's relate this to our own experiences around work as a child, a teenager, young adult, and even through today. For many of us, work was the expectation from a very early age. In preparation for work and in order to learn the rules of work, like listening and following directions and completing tasks as assigned, many of us were asked what we wanted to be when we grew up and were given chores. I know I had to do a lot of folding and a lot of potato peeling. We were maybe expected to find summer work once we were a teenager or get a part-time job when we turned 14 or 16. We were expected to work and oftentimes to continue our education and build our experiences and then eventually do work that suited us or suited our interests to progress to where we are today. And don't forget that besides high expectations, that we had different types and levels of support offered to us, offered to you, all along the way in our career that helped us get to where we are today. Maybe our first job or many of our jobs we've been connected to because of someone we knew or because someone we know knew somebody else. We all received education, training, coaching, skill building, emotional support, utilized technology, had support in making decisions from natural and professional supports all along the way, right? This all sounds familiar and normal, right? Our own examples really demonstrate how powerful expectations about work are in our lives and how important they are for persons with disabilities. Expectations are formed early and over time. Expectations shape experiences, and experiences shape expectations. Again, we see a bidirectional relationship. And expectations are influenced by opportunities and supports. Yet these are the things missing for persons with disabilities. The expectation may not be there early. The persons with disabilities will work and will do work that is suited to their interests and talents. There also may be negative assumptions or labels placed on individuals if they need support in making decisions about work and how to get into a career of their choice. All of us needed help, and some of us needed more help than others, and at different times. The same is true for persons with disabilities. There's many ways to get help as there are people. So we must have the same expectations related to work, particularly for youth, that they either continue their education or continue on in paid work or get paid work experience even before leaving high school. And for adults, the expectation of work and work that matches their interests and skills with the proper support along the way. These are the expectations you should have and should be talking about. I mentioned assumptions right now. We must be careful about our assumptions when it comes to persons with the most significant disabilities working, as assumptions are beliefs or ideas we hold to be true that require little evidence. Often we are taught our assumptions, and they're usually pretty helpful as they expedite our decision making. But Abby warned us we must be careful about relying on our assumptions or beliefs around employment and who can work, as we might make major mistakes that have serious consequences related to work and how we treat and interact with individuals, who we allow to work, and what we believe employers will tolerate. The language we use reinforces our assumptions, and so we have to be careful of the language we use as well. Now, we are really good in our field at using jargon and technical terms, right? I've already used a lot of them today. And as a national health plan providing LTSS or any other HCBS or LTSS entity, you're likely having to operate from a traditional medical model when it comes to approaching members' treatment and service planning and the provision of that. You're charged with improving and ensuring individual members' quality of life through the accessing of LTSS, while at the same time maximizing fiscal efficiency. But the things we're talking about today, about having high expectations that everyone can work and being able to engage individuals in an individualized and person-centered way, really requires that recovery-based or person-centered approach and set of beliefs. And each model, the medical model, let's say, versus the person-centered model and the recovery model, they each have their own set of beliefs, assumptions, and nomenclature or language. And this can be a real conundrum or challenge or source of incongruence for any case manager. And it can be quite difficult when interfacing with individuals and families, trying to move between your two worlds, translating and interpreting all this language. So let's talk about some of these beliefs and assumptions and language differences, and how you might be able to integrate some of that person-centered or recovery approach and language into your day-to-day. So the medical model tends to often focus on diagnosis and deficits and labels, where a person-centered or recovery approach likes to focus on strengths and contributions. And when we're talking about employment, and just really all of life, but in employment, that no skill is insignificant. And it sees safety concerns or barriers, health concerns or barriers, and high support needs related to employment. Those are really framed as conditions for success and things we've got to figure out as an interdisciplinary team and natural supports versus, again, a barrier to employment. The medical model tends to focus on custodial care and sees staff as experts and staff needing to direct treatment versus a community-based inclusive model, which is really about environments and creating opportunities to explore and understand options. Individuals and their families are seen as experts. Providers are really the skilled supports. Strength and preference-based are really what shapes services, and services, again, are responsive and timely. The medical model relied heavily on sheltered work environments versus in a person-centered or recovery model approach, there's a focus on supported employment, and that includes customized employment and individual placements and support. In the former model, especially as it relates to employment, we tend to focus on people being ready, being stabilized, and being compliant before accessing and or pursuing employment opportunities. Again, in a person-centered approach, it's really about zero exclusion and eligibility based on choice. There's no prerequisites. If somebody says, I want to go to work, then it's time to go to work. In a medical model, it might be more about doing for or making decisions for versus knowing what is important to and important for and supported decision-making, which really means ensuring informed choice through exploration and experiences. In a person-centered approach, it's really about trying to expose people to as many mental, emotional, spiritual, and physical opportunities as you can. And the medical model, unfortunately, sometimes it focuses more on a way of doing or a process, right? Checking off the boxes. Where a person-centered or recovery approach really focuses on a way of being, on a way of interacting. Person-centeredness doesn't require a tool. And remember that person-centered planning considers personal preferences, health and safety needs, without necessarily restricting freedoms. So now that we have some foundation with some definitions on employment first and Iowa's employment first vision, and some of the historical and current legislative context for employment first in Iowa, and we talked about the role of expectations and you having high expectations, now let's help you get prepared to have discussions with individuals and their families and their teams to choose and implement a path to employment. So your first question might be, when should I talk about employment with members? Having discussions with members, their families, and teams can occur at any time as directed by the member, but can also happen naturally at any time during the HCBS service planning cycle. Service planning for Medicaid HCBS waiver and habilitation services are individualized to meet the needs of each member and involves person-centered planning, a core standardized assessment, that's a mouthful, right, or CSA, and an annual review. Employment is a service or support category identified in both the CSA and the support plan. The CSA, or functional assessment, identifies the member's needs for employment services and supports. The person-centered plan identifies the service needs and plan for employment. And service prior authorization ensures that the service is appropriate based on the assessed needs and goals within the member's plan. So, as you can see, employment can and should be discussed at various intervals and opportunities within the cycle. And there are many. Should it happen at least annually? Absolutely. Quarterly visits and check-ins? Again, absolutely. And plug the role of employment into people's lives where you can. Mention it at every meeting and when exploring future goals with people and their families. Use success stories to convey creative options used by others. You can communicate that culturally and generationally, having a job is the new norm for persons with disabilities. And again, it's a part of your role to help describe what it might look like. You can use multiple approaches and communication strategies, as well as share the core message about work in things like videos or community or family forums, printed materials, and stuff like that. So maybe you're thinking, okay, Jess, yeah, I got that, but oh, where do I start? What do I say? What if there are questions or objections or resistance? Then what do I say or do? Don't worry. You don't have to have all the answers, and we'll talk about how to handle objections and answer questions and concerns, how to frame change and uncertainty in a positive way, and how to encourage and support, again, exploration, experiences, and choices. There they are again, those 3 words, because ultimately, these are your aims. You do have to remember, though, in this process, like I said earlier, that it is tough work, but you got to remain hopeful. There are as many ways to go about it as there are people. And just, again, maintain your high expectations and collaborative spirit, because you will meet resistance. But as thoughtful practitioners in whatever role we have, right, we're always sensitive and aware that some people with disabilities and their families may be sensitive about work issues and talking about work or considering changing their work. This may be due to being told that they could not or would not work in the community, maybe ever. Maybe they've had past failures. Maybe there's a lack of a desire to work. Maybe they view the questions as pressure to work or work to work in a particular setting, or maybe they view the conversation as insulting because of the extensive limitations of the member being served. Right? We just want to keep those in mind. But again, we'll talk about how to frame things in a positive way and to keep having those conversations that create change and that encourage, facilitate, and support exploration, experience, and choices. I also want you to remember, before we kind of dive into this here, and this is straight from the Employment First Guidebook, it's important to involve existing providers in discussions about integrated community employment as an option. And this includes asking residential, day have, and/or the pre-vocational service provider to help the person learn about integrated competitive employment options. Make learning about and exploring integrated competitive employment a goal attached to the authorization of these services. Education and exploration can be done within the time that other services are being delivered. Employment can always be explored as a topic. If the current provider is also a provider of supported employment, they're hopefully already having these conversations with individuals and their families, and honestly, they're your biggest ally and asset in all of this. They can provide information and education on integrated competitive employment, how supported employment works and what some of the first steps might be. They can help create that vision. and share success stories. They can talk about the strategies for placement and help address concerns, and to help even answer questions and coordinate that process of, let's say, connecting with IVRS. So let's talk about approaching, planning, and having conversations with individuals and families. First, I want to remind you of the decision trees and guides, again in the Employment First Guidebook, to help you determine whether or not pre-vocational services can be authorized or reauthorized, depending on if the individual has a goal for integrated competitive employment and a need for skill building opportunities and experiences. The slide I'm showing you now outlines for you step by step what to consider and what you might do for members enrolled in pre-vocational services prior to May 1st of 2016. And this is related to service time limits and participation in career exploration and referral to IVRS. And then there's also a step-by-step for you for those not enrolled in pre-vocational services prior to May 1st, 2016, and what provisions must be met before entering into pre-vocational services and work that pays some minimum wage. And that's, again, related to WIOA. So let's talk about path to employment and employment planning guides. And these next three tables that I'm going to show you are really guides just to help you as you connect with individuals and their families. It gives you some talking points or some conversation starters or questions to get the conversation going about current employment or thoughts and fears and expectations around employment. And that way you can elicit responses and information that will then help you shape planning. So the first scenario we have here, a possibility, is that a member is already employed. They could already be working an integrated competitive job, earning at least minimum wage, or maybe they're working in a sheltered setting, earning a sub-minimum wage. But here, all the way to the left, there are things that you can talk about to get the conversation going, to talk to the person about their current job, what they like about it, what they don't like about it. Are they making enough? Do they want to learn about different jobs or expand their current tasks? And then based on the responses, this can give you some direction or help you shape the content for your ISP. So let's say if the individual indicates a general satisfaction with their current integrated competitive job and earnings, the focus in the ISP would be to maintain or improve outcomes of their current situation. If the individual is earning sub-minimum wage, it indicates interest in learning about other jobs, or maybe they're possibly dissatisfied with their current jobs and earnings. We're going to go to, which will be the next table, member unemployed or underemployed and wants to work. And that will give you some further guidance. Or the individual who is earning a sub-minimum wage possibly expresses a desire to not work or explore work in the community. Then we're going to go to the third table, which is member not focused on employment. So then depending on their response, this can then shape the content of the ISP. And there's some suggestions here all the way to the right. So if the member is currently employed in the community and again indicates general satisfaction, the plan can address how the individual will stay successful in their current job. It can address how the individual will increase their wages, either through increased hours or another job. And it needs to address other important to and important for services and activities, supports outside of the employment path that might continue to be available. And this may include the utilization of pre-vocational services as a wraparound. If the individual currently employed in the facility at sub-minimum wage indicates that they're interested in maybe exploring employment in the community, and even possibly if they express a desire not to or an uncertainty, you do want to make sure the plan addresses participating in career exploration, that it addresses the status or what has happened around providing the member information on supported employment, the benefits of work in the community and referral to supported employment services, the status of the referral to IVRS, or if you need more guidance and more ideas, you can go to this next table here, member unemployed or underemployed. So again, let's say the member is either unemployed or underemployed, which maybe means they want more hours, a different job, or again, maybe they're earning a sub-minimum wage, but they're interested in work and exploring work in the community. Again, there's some ideas of things to talk about, things to get the conversation going and to inform you and shape the plan. You might also be collecting information that's going to be helpful to the supported employment provider and the job developer. So as you listen to an individual's responses to the questions, determine if their plan should address structured activities to help with further self-determination. If the individual has a clear desire for employment now, the team can develop the ISP for employment that identifies HCBS provider of employment services and support and any other resources related to achieving the employment outcome. If the individual or the team can answer a few of the questions, but believes work to be a possibility, use the CSA and the information gathered here, so the information in the assessment and then the information collected in your discussions, maybe multiple discussions, to determine the gaps in information or experience that should be considered as a part of the ISP for employment. If the individual is of working age but is unable to clearly answer these questions, again, maybe there's a lot of unclarity or uncertainty, or maybe the impact of disability might just make that difficult. The team might want to support the individual with exploration to help identify their interests and strengths through activities like career exploration or discovery. If the team believes the individual does want a job, they can go ahead and begin employment services. Some suggested content for the ISP, it should address the member's employment goal, absolutely, with activities targeting obtaining employment or exploring employment, like career exploration, discovery, and maybe even job development. It identifies interventions and supports that highlight employment-related competencies. It addresses how the individual is going to learn about employment, to assess their interests and their ability to make informed choice, and to overcome their fears and barriers. That's going to be important because you're going to need to ensure that you can demonstrate informed choice. You want to make sure that the plan addresses or identifies those fears and barriers that the individual and family have communicated, and then what interventions and supports that are going to be offered or utilized to help remediate those fears and barriers or help address those. It identifies the strategies to access potential funding resources for employment, and again addresses the important to and important for. Let's say a member is not focused on employment. And this might translate in a lot of different ways. It may seem as resistant or concern or fear or uncertainty, or it may just be genuine disinterest in work. But there's some ideas here of some things that can help you engage the person in some conversation about work, to help them get thinking about work. And again, this just builds on the past three guides. And so you can use all of that to engage people in multiple conversations over time about employment. And we'll talk a little later about motivational interviewing, which will also help with members who are not focused or seem indifferent to employment. So let's say based on responses, and we'll skip those that are retired, but let's say if the working age individual says, I don't want to work, it is the responsibility of the team, the entire team, to consider how the present plan, life activities, experiences, and interests may lead closer to employment in the future, to present information about and opportunities for employment on an annual basis, and then to clearly document that the individual has made an informed decision to not work. And then down below here, we've provided you some guidance on what might be indicators of informed choice. And we'll review more of these later. I won't read through all of these now, but it's some of the things that we've already talked about providing people information, opportunities for experiences. What are their experiences? Do we know what they've tried or possibly had support in out in the community? And then have we weighed all the options and the positive and negative with them? Have they had access to benefits counseling? And have a reasonable efforts been made to identify and address concerns? So based on that response, the ISP content is, of course, going to describe non-work activities in which the individual chooses to participate, but it also should identify how preferred activities could be related to future employment and how they might incorporate some exploration in ways that might inform the individual's future decisions related to employment. It needs to record that there was a discussion or that there were efforts made to assure that the person was making an informed choice. And if the individual is currently utilizing pre-vocational services and has explicitly expressed a desire to not work in the community, then they should begin to transition out of pre-vocational services into a more appropriate service. Now, before we leave the guides, I just want to remind you that a member's ISP may include 2 or more types of non-residential services or employment services, like individual supported employment, long-term job coaching, small group supported employment, pre-vocational services, and even day hab. You can support the member to continue to learn and explore integrated competitive employment through their residential, day, and/or pre-vocational service provider. You can make learning about employment attached to the authorization of these services, and it can be incorporated into the delivery of these services. And just remember, keep talking about employment as much as you can, quarterly, annually, and integrate employment into as many of the individual's experiences as you can. So now let's talk about those concerns and fears and objections that come up. And we all know and understand the fear and worry and confusion and maybe even grief that come along during times of change or uncertainty, particularly when it impacts those we love and care about. So while all of us can relate to what families and guardians and individuals might be feeling, if they're being asked or we're talking to them about changing their current employment situation or to consider employment in the community, some have been in their particular employment situation for years or even decades. Some individuals and families and communities are facing CRPs discontinuing their sheltered employment services and programs, so they will no longer be able to continue working there. And that's really a big deal for these individuals and their families and for the whole community. Well, as we talked earlier, some individuals with disabilities and or their family members may be sensitive in talking about work issues. And we kind of talked about some of those reasons earlier. And what do we all want when we're feeling that way, right? When we're feeling anxious and unsure and fearful, we want to be communicated with and we want information and choices. And that's precisely what you're skilled in providing. And you can provide a lot of great comfort to anxious families and individuals. You can remain honest and transparent, and you don't have to have all the answers, and you don't have to make any guarantees. What you can guarantee is to offer your assistance, that you can connect them with resources that can support them in addressing their concerns and making informed choices. So let's take a look here and talk about some of the common concerns and fears or even objections that come up when we're talking about employment in the community or integrated competitive employment. And I'm going to talk about this in such a way as if the individual or the family were asking or posing this question or concern or objection, and then I'm going to share it back in the way that I would share it back. And you can take from that what you want. You have to make it authentic to you and to your tone and personality and pace, okay? So oftentimes, some common concerns or something that comes up, and a very valid one, are health concerns or safety concerns, or maybe the individual has really high support needs. Again, these are serious and legitimate things that we have to address. And disability may absolutely impact the types of or kinds of jobs that a person might do and the number of hours they might be able to work. Looking for a safe place to work is a part of the customized employment process and will be taken into consideration when the employment specialist or job developer is developing a match and negotiating with the employer. These are part of the conditions for success that the employment specialist will include or facilitate, again, when they negotiate, and they will ensure in the follow-up or ongoing supports. But it will be important for you as a case manager to help the family and or individual define what safe is in relationship to the member's support needs. So for example, does the individual have a history of walking out the door, maybe versus being vulnerable to others, versus maybe having a seizure disorder? All of these present different safety concerns that need to be matched and negotiated and individualized. It's up to us to help the family and to help the team, including the supported employment provider, to learn and determine what will work in terms of the environment, learning style, and stamina. Maybe the individual is worried about leaving their current job and coworkers, meeting new people, and making new friends. Well, what we're learning and hearing from others who are working in the community is that it isn't so bad to learn a new job and meet new people, and that you can keep your old friends even though you're working in a different environment. You find different times to meet with them outside of work, and then you meet new friends at your current place. And remember, at one time, your current job was your new job, and it seemed scary, and you didn't know anyone. But again, we hear people having lots of success in meeting new people and making new friends and adding to their networks. You can even receive support in establishing new relationships and adapting to company culture with the support of a job coach. Maybe the individual is not so sure what type of job they want to do, or the parents or guardians are saying, you know, I don't know what my son or daughter likes or what they could do, and that's fair. And this is why it's important to explore and to learn, and there are lots of people to help explore those different options and try experiences to get a feel for what might be a good fit. You don't have to know exactly what you want to do. You just have to know that you want to explore and try new things. An employment specialist will spend time getting to know you or your son or daughter in the community, doing familiar and unfamiliar activities, talking with people who know them, and who know them at their best, to discover their interests, abilities, and support needs. You might be wondering, who will hire me, or who will hire my son or daughter? Or you might hear say, you know, my son or daughter really doesn't have a lot of skills, or skills that are marketable, and they aren't ready for competitive work. Well, again, there are a lot of good resources and people available to help find places that you or your son or daughter can work, and employers that need their skills and talents. Again, customized employment approach eliminates the need to be ready. If you want to work, it's time to go, because the key aspect is finding work that matches interests and skills. Supported employment specialists work closely with the individual and the business to negotiate a specific position or set of tasks, again, utilizing their talents to match the business needs. Again, you might hear that my son or daughter isn't skilled, and maybe they need to work in a sheltered setting first. But typically individuals with the most significant disabilities do not or aren't able to transfer skills learned in one setting to another as easily. And it can be difficult to simulate the features of a job in a setting that doesn't have the coworkers and the demands of that particular workplace and workforce. And as we know, position descriptions can be different from business to business, and how those tasks are then completed. So it's actually best to learn, or for the individual to learn the task in the actual workplace, and possibly with support. And that takes us to maybe being concerned about learning new skills and tasks, and who will provide support on the job if it's needed. Well, that support is there, and you'll have that, again, as employment specialists and or job coaches through supported employment are there to help learn new skills and tasks. They can negotiate workplace support and can help be available to implement systematic instruction, which is a specific way of teaching. and the development of natural supports for the employee, and also provide the business any additional services and support. So maybe some of these negotiated supports, it could, again, be additional support during initial training from a job coach. Perhaps it's long-term. Maybe it's the use of some assistive technology or some kind of modification like a flexible schedule. Regardless, it can be tailored specifically to the individual and negotiated up front with the employer. You might be afraid of losing benefits, or a family might be fearful of an individual losing benefits, or specifically their medical coverage tied to the benefit. Well, if an individual gets a job that pays them a higher wage, and again, there's a great resource available called benefits planning and benefits planners that can help people determine specifically how work will impact them and their benefits. You want to make sure that your message about the importance of work and the role of earned income on the impact of benefits is always clear and consistent, especially when talking to individuals and families. While earned income from work may have an impact on benefits, it's important to help others realize the potential for the combination of the two to generate a higher total monthly income. So I want to encourage you to watch another module in the series called Benefits Planning 101 with Brian Dennis, who clearly demonstrates the reality of a higher monthly income when combining earned wages from work and benefits, and then the different incentives and protections and safety nets for maintaining medical coverage and the cash benefit eligibility. Some might just wonder how they're going to get there. And again, very valid concern. But again, there's different options and people to help, and it may look different than it does now. But again, this is something that can be customized on an individual basis. There might be questions about the extra cost to the employer or the individual versus what they really earn. While the individual will make at least minimum wage or what others doing similar tasks make, it will be negotiated at higher. If the individual is receiving Social Security, again, there are a number of work incentives that they could possibly claim. And work incentives, again, are designed to assist in paying for expenses that are needed for work or that are related to work. Customization may cost nothing, and most accommodations or modifications are inexpensive and oftentimes improve the work environment or productivity for everybody. Employers value reduced turnover, reduced time to hire, and increased productivity. And these are the things that people with disabilities offer. Research shows that persons with disabilities offer businesses increased diversity and ability to address unmet needs, resourcefulness, innovative thinking, and improved morale and productivity throughout their organization. And last, but certainly not least, what if it doesn't work out? And, I really want to protect my son or daughter or loved one from failure and rejection. Well, the truth is we've all had jobs that haven't worked out, and we learned and grew from those and applied that to the next job. But hopefully, in utilizing customized employment, we're making good matches to prevent this from happening, and with ongoing supports to resolve any issues that arise, address any issues that arise, and we don't have to worry about that. To want to protect those we love, especially from rejection or failure. But let's encourage family members to focus on maximizing the individual's chances for success by focusing on their strengths, staying involved in the job development phase, sharing their networks, problem solving the support needs in order to be successful, and in helping practice soft skills. And so all the strategies that I just shared with you, or some of the explanations that I just shared with you, come from a number of different tools out there that I'll provide links to you later on, but that includes the TTAP Q&A on customized employment, addressing parental concerns from the Virginia Commonwealth and ICI. And again, I'll share those links with you later. So let's talk a little bit more about strategies for support and helping to create that vision. We hit on some of these already, but let's just make sure. So again, benefits planning is a strategy and something that helps create a vision for somebody and their family for what work might look like. You can access benefits planners through IVRS. Community rehabilitation providers often have benefits planners on staff, and then Disability Rights Iowa and the WIPA Project also provide benefits planning. And again, this is to help understand the impact of work on benefits and what opportunities there are for community work at a higher wage. There's career exploration and discovery versus traditional self-assessment, which can help people learn what they like and what they don't like, where they're at their best and what they're good at, and what might be some of those conditions for employment, like the environment, the schedule, the tasks, the culture, the supports, and the transportation. You want to support any and all activities that increase self-awareness and self-determination for the member, or again, those three aims that we've been talking about: exploration, experiences, and choices. Again, there's supported employment, which includes customized employment, individualized placement and support, and systematic instruction. Assistive technology can be both simple and complex, expensive and inexpensive. Easter seals and IVRS are some examples of where individuals can access assistive technology and get support in that. There's on-the-job training, which may include internships and apprenticeships. Again, these help get people experience and training on the job that may lead to a hire, but again, are always good experience. Volunteering. This can help people, again, learn more about themselves and explore what they might want to do for work. It also expands their networks socially and professionally. There's the use of labor market information, or again, this is just different job opportunities in a community, particular areas of growth, areas for training. Then there's skill training. There's various programs throughout the state, including through IWD and IVRS and CRP, like Project Search. And again, there's natural support. So now we've talked about and reviewed most of the strategies for addressing concerns and having conversations and moving folks towards integrated competitive employment and positive framing. So now you have your expectations high, your beliefs are positive, and your assumptions are in check, right? You are conveying changes and information in a positive way because you're informed and prepared to discuss them, and you know how local providers are approaching changes in employment and their capacity to achieve those outcomes. You are also going to share information about work in a manner that's reflective of the person's ability to understand and communicate by determining when and where to have the conversation. And you're also going to use the person-centered and creative approaches, again, like pulling in videos or pictures to meet people where they're at, connecting them with other people and individuals and families who are working, whatever it is, whatever it takes to meet them where they're at. We remember that conversations create change, right? And to keep having those conversations, even if rejected, and to be prepared for resistance. Again, some might be interested and enthusiastic right away, and others, again, for various reasons that we've already discussed, might feel unsure or resistant. And so another technique or set of tools that I want to mention here real quick that can help you with ongoing conversations about work and elicit some change talk about work is motivational interviewing. Motivational interviewing, though originally developed when working with individuals with substance abuse issues, introduces a specific communication style and planning process for job seekers who may lack motivation or who have concerns and issues related to securing employment. Motivational interviewing believes people have skills and internal attributes to make change, again, back to high expectations, and that if you treat people like they're capable, they may behave and believe the same. Many things can prompt change or change behavior, but in motivational interviewing, actual change only occurs when the person connects the change or the desired change with something of intrinsic value, something that is important or cherished. So MI really allows you to meet the person where they're at, regardless of what stage of change they're in, and help them engage in some change talk. You're a conduit in ways to help the person and the family then articulate what they're experiencing and why related to the change you're asking them to make. Again, which might be to consider employment in the community or to consider a different job in the community. So when using motivational interviewing, you don't have to argue, confront, defend, explain why it's important, warn what someone ought to do or give advice. Rather, you can just listen and reflect and adjust your approach and gently persuade and be optimistic and offer hope. You can focus on what they're doing now versus what they haven't done and what they've done in the past that's been successful. I would encourage you, if you're interested in motivational interviewing, to look it up. There's a lot of great resources out there. So ensuring informed choice and indicators of informed choice. Again, we touched on this in the employment planning portion of the presentation, but I think it's important to reiterate. Informed choice, or creating an environment for informed choice, again, that's really what it's about. It's about an environment, a way of being, a way of interacting, and it's about encouraging, again, exploration, experience, and choices. It's about knowing what's important to and important for the person. You've got to determine if an individual's preferences really reflect informed choice and what the appropriate next step might be. You have to ask yourself, does the person have experiences with options to develop personal preferences? And you've got to ask that too. If the answer is no, or maybe, or we're not sure, then how can you present a plan that includes life activities, experiences, and interests that lead closer to employment in the future? Well, you can do that by providing information on the benefits of work in integrated employment. So talking about valued roles and experiences and relationships and the benefits to health and income and work as an outlet, all those things that we get from work. Talk about that with the person and share your own. You can provide information on a variety of employment options, and again, it needs to be provided in a manner reflective of the individual's ability to understand and communicate. So you want to talk about the different service providers in the community, the service types and settings they offer, and the different approaches to employment. You want to ask, has the person had experiences with options to develop personal preferences? Again, does this include tours, job shadows, informational interviews, on-site training, or a work trial? Have they been through discovery before? And Dale Verstegen, again, another subject matter expert with Transcend, gave us a little bit of guidance on what work experiences should include, and I'll tell you what some of those are here. So work experience should include some discovery in the traditional sense or in the formal sense, but in that the person is able to discover some talents, what they like and don't like, some of their skills, what some of their support needs are, where they might fit in, and some of their interests. Work experience should allow for some exploration. Where can people discover where they can do things and do things that they're good at? It has to include some trial and error, or the ability to learn by doing. They have to occur in the real world, no simulations, no fake environments. And again, they're meaningful experiences as they allow for discovery, there's realistic expectations, and they include personal development. Support includes consideration of positive and negative consequences of the decision, and presentation of this information should be provided by more than one member of the team. So maybe by the case manager, maybe by the supported employment provider, or maybe by the residential provider. Again, remember, you can support a member to continue to learn and explore integrated competitive employment and their other services like residential, day, and pre-vocational services. Has the individual and their family had access to benefits counseling and planning? Have they had opportunities to connect with peers and their families working in integrated employment? And then has the team, including the case manager, made reasonable efforts to identify and then address the concerns? So who can help? What are the referral and funding sources related to integrated competitive employment? And who should you be inviting to the table and or educating folks about? Well, we've talked about the importance of family, friends, and neighbors. They can offer great insight on the person, and they're really the experts on the person. They can encourage the family member to explore, experience, and understand their choices. It's okay to encourage families to participate with the individual in different community building activities and or to observe the person at work. Maybe they've never seen their family member work, meaning in a sheltered setting, and that can always be a really great experience for everybody. Again, make sure you're connecting them with other families and individuals working in the community. They have to be involved in the job search. Encourage them to be so that they can share their personal and professional networks with job developers. And this just casts a wider net available for job leads. And again, help them focus on what the individual wants to do and then what supports are going to be needed to make it happen. Iowa Vocational Rehabilitation Services, again, is another great resource for job services and supports, including funding for skills training, tools, and uniforms. I want to encourage you to watch module on IVRS 101. It'll give you some more specifics on who, when, and how to refer. And I've included a link here on this slide so that you can contact your local office. There's the Iowa Department for the Blind. Again, this is also another federal and state funded program and is similar to the VR General program. And again, they provide help to individuals who are blind or visually impaired successfully find and retain high quality jobs. They offer training, education, technology, and career counseling. IDB has aligned their regions with the Iowa Workforce Development regions, and so a counselor is assigned to each of those regions. However, they don't have field offices. Rather, they like to meet with individuals in libraries, schools, or other places that are convenient to them. So the counselors do a lot of traveling, but they serve all 99 counties, just like IVRS. Some counselors may serve more than one region. Most clients complete their intake over the phone by calling the main number, and then they're assigned to a counselor who then connects with them, but they can also complete referral online, and I've added that link for you there. And then you can go to the IDB website just to learn more about the general agency. Community rehabilitation providers who offer a variety of employment services. Providers across the state have been increasing their capacity to offer community-based individualized services and employment. And again, they're really your ally in rallying families and guardians, in creating a vision for the individual and their families, in coordinating and leveraging additional funding and partners, and really can really help you guide the process through to the outcome, and can help you understand what services and supports might be needed in the plan and when they might need to be authorized. There's the Iowa Centers for Independent Living. These are independent, consumer-driven, cross-disability, community-based nonprofit organizations committed to independent living principles. They're not residential facilities. Federal standards require Centers for Independent Living to be responsive to their local communities and to provide their core services, which I have listed here, regardless of the disability type, to work with consumers to reach their goals and to manage resources in compliance with the Rehab Act. And I've included their contact information on here, but that'll be an appendix to the training that's included in the module, and you can also access it there at the website. I've included the Centers for Independent Living's website there for you. Iowa Workforce Development offer work services and supports, opportunities for training, experiences, resources, funding, integrated resource teams, and benefits planning. I show you here some of the services and supports offered to persons with disabilities through the workforce centers, and this will also be included in the module as an appendix. There's the Iowa Department on Aging. It's a federal program supporting older Iowans and with disabilities and skills training and employment services to assist in obtaining and maintaining employment. There's 2 programs for seniors in support for employment, and that's the Older Worker Employment Program and the Senior Community Services Employment Program. And there's a couple of different ways to access or get to these services. But what I'm going to encourage you to do is to access the services through the Aging Network, and that's through lifelong links. So I've included that link there along with a telephone number. And if you call or connect with that, you'll receive information about the services available. And through this contact, you or the individual can be connected to the different options and an options counselor who will then, a little bit further, get you connected with one of the 6 area agencies on aging, or the AAAs, okay? So again, utilize the link or the telephone number to connect with the Iowa Department on Aging. And again, this is for older workers. And they have employment specialists specifically for older workers and supporting older workers. And then benefits planning. Again, oftentimes community rehabilitation providers employ benefits planners on staff. IVRS provides benefits planning, and they have benefits planners in all of their offices, local offices, I should say. Disability Rights Iowa and the Work Incentives Planning and Assistance Grant, or WIPA, another great resource for families and access and benefits planning. Have WIPA eligible beneficiaries call the ticket helpline at that number. The Disability Employment Initiative also provides benefits planning through its DRCs. And again, DEI, or the Integrated Resource Teams, work through Iowa Workforce Development. And I will include contacts for that, again, in the appendix of this training. And last but not least, there's the link to Social Security's Red Book. So bringing it all together here, all right? Everybody can work with the right match and the right support. And person-centeredness is really a way of being versus a way of doing. And conveying changes and uncertainty in a positive way is going to be really important, which means you have to know what changes are coming and how they're going to impact individuals, families, and the service system. You are and are going to be prepared, and you're going to roll with resistance. Have a success story so that when you're talking with and connecting with families, because oftentimes if somebody's working in a facility, that has been very safe and consistent. And again, they're going to need a story or a vision for what it's going to look like. Be able to connect them with other families who have been there so that they can see what it looks like and that their child was okay. You're going to be able to identify and address concerns and fears and know that you don't have to have all the answers. You just need to listen and validate and help reframe those as a condition for success, and to share the strategies and resources to help minimize or mitigate those. You're going to encourage, facilitate, and support exploration, experience, and choices. Start with one person, with one family at a time. Focus on a person in the family that's asking for something different. Start there because they can become your biggest cheerleaders later on. Remember that conversations create change. Keep having them and be authentic to yourself and your style and get creative. And again, ensuring informed choice. Remember that there are as many ways to get help as there are people, and that it's all about exploration, experiences, and offering choices. Here are some of the resources I referenced throughout the training, available electronically. Thank you. That brings us to the end of our presentation.